This is episode 41 of the Women in Depth podcast. The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome back to Women in Depth. I'm your host, Lourdes Viado. Today's guest has been described as a modern-day medicine woman. Chonteau McElvin uses natural healing approaches such as herbalism, folk medicine, and shamanic practices to support women in their healing journey. Chonteau is the founder and program developer of Soul Care University, a distance learning virtual healing center, and loves developing programs that support women's spirituality, intuition, and mindfulness. Chonteau has created and published a journal called An 84-Day Self-Care Journey for Women in Their Middle Years. This affirmational journal is a tool for self-discovery and a guide for women who are feeling stuck and ready to learn how to give to themselves. Today, Chonteau will talk about the middle years, a time that many women dread and struggle with. Chonteau will talk about why the middle years matter, why this time is different from other times in a woman's life, the experiences a woman may have during this time, and what the healing journey involves. Chonteau will also share how she uses natural approaches such as sacred plant medicine and shamanism to support women in their middle years. Chonteau will talk about misperceptions and myths about these approaches, and she'll talk about how someone can choose a practitioner, what someone might experience in the healing process, and who can benefit from these approaches. Hi, Chonteau, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation, as I know that women in the middle years are grappling with a lot of change.
Yeah.
From the physical to the emotional, a lot of transition that is happening. And so I really feel that what we are going to talk about today can be a support and will resonate with them.
Yeah, I definitely love talking about this subject, and I think so too.
So Chonteau, can you start with letting us know what drew you to this work of supporting women in their middle years, and also the way that you support them using, non-traditional approaches?
Yeah, I would say what drew me to working with this population is me entering into my middle years. And that was pretty much the catalyst. I think for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be 40. I would always, when I was in my 20s, I can't wait until I'm 40. When I was in my 30s, I can't wait until I'm 40. And then when I turned 40, I just felt like my life just came alive. And I was just so excited to be in this time in my life. And so I think I was just born to be in this middle time of my life where there's just so much richness and wisdom. And I've been called to be a part of that. It's not anything, I don't feel it's anything really grand. It's just that I have loved what I've woven for myself within this time of my life. And I wanted to share how I'm living my life. I believe in stories and the healing that comes from stories. And so I feel women in their wise years, their middle years, they're open to sharing their stories and to hearing the stories of others.
Chonteau, that's a really unique way to look at the 40s. And I think that for many women, they don't look forward to the 40s and view it as a time where they are getting older, which they view as not good. And so I think that's a really interesting perspective, that not only did you look forward to your 40s, but that it was really this wonderful space and time for you.
Yeah, I think it's because I was introduced to many women in my life early that were elders. And so I think by having those models of elder women in my life, I didn't fear eldership. I didn't fear moving into these times of a life when the women around me would talk about how grand it is. Woven in is lots of pain and lots of emotional ups and downs, but there was so much love and so much freedom that I looked forward to it. And so my mother passed when I was 12. And so it was in my early 20s that I began meeting older women who became my surrogate mothers and my surrogate grandmothers. And I connected in with different women's groups. And I was always like the youngest one. So I just received so much love from this group of women that I couldn't wait to be in that spot where I could then give back.
I think that, what you're sharing is so profound, because I feel that, you said that you had these elders who were able to model this experience and guide you and mentor you through this. And I feel that there is a lack of that type of experience or person in many, many young women's lives. And and so it's very difficult to perceive this time and space as you described, a very rich time full of potential and possibility.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's something that's lacking in our culture is our connection, especially as women, our connection to the elder women who have embraced their crone. They've embraced the wrinkles. And as I'm thinking about it, it started even as a child. My great grandmother died at 103.
Wow.
And I remember going to visit her in Virginia, and I remember playing in her wrinkles.
Oh.
I just ran my fingers through her soft skin and through the wrinkles on her face and her hands. And I know my mother used to say, "Quit playing in grandma's wrinkles." And great grandma would say, "No, let her play. And I remember that. And I remember growing up with my grandmother coming to visit me, and she stayed in my room. And she's the one that taught me so many things about folk healing. And she let me, I was one that brushed her hair. So I got to brush grandma's gray, her hair was all gray and black. And I would ask her questions about, how she grew up. She was born in 1900.
Wow.
So I got to ask her questions, and she shared her stories with me, and she shared her life with me. And I was fascinated. So I think, we all come in, right, with this way of how we're supposed to be. I'm talking, we all sit at the council of whatever council's in the sky, and they say, okay, this is your mission, and you accept that as a spirit. And so I just feel like it's something I came in with.
Yeah.
So I get really clearly that I'm not in the norm, and I get that it was easy for me to make this transition, but I don't take that for granted. And I don't think that, oh yeah, you ought to do that, and you ought to do that, and you ought to do that. It's something I came in with because it's what I was supposed to model and teach.
Yeah. What a beautiful experience. As you're sharing these memories of you and your great grandmother, I am just visualizing, and you can see that it was a very magical container, a very special time. And and then I was also thinking about, and this is probably a whole other podcast topic, but I'm just going to put it out there anyway. But I was just thinking about how just in general, it's difficult for women to have a sense of connection and to form these communities. And I think that for quite some time, what has happened is women have viewed each other not as sisters or not as supports, but as competition. And that, I actually had a podcast guest a few months ago who spoke about birth trauma. And one of the things we touched on was how, there was a time when a woman gave birth and she was surrounded by a sisterhood and women from all ages, from the elderly to the middle-aged to the very young, so that they could help her make this transition, into this new space, especially for new moms, and how that we no longer have that. And so how that's connected to a lot of the trauma that comes with birth and the isolation with new moms. And so I know it's a little bit different, but I think this is another important phase in a woman's life, again, where that sense of connection and community is lacking.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, because with each transition, at least in my view, with each transition we go through from the maiden to the mother to the crone, it's an initiation. It's a
Yes,
birthing. And
absolutely.
so it's important that we have these midwives, right? For lack of a
Hmm.
better term, that we have these midwives that are supporting us through these transitions. And so, yes, it's twofold, I guess. On one aspect, I feel those communities are there and they are showing up for many, many, many women. At the same time, through another lens, it's not there. So for me, yes, it was there. For my circle of women that I move with, it's there for them as well. And it may not even be, our communities may not even be the same, but we all have a community. And so it feels like when we get into that vibration of that is what we're wanting, that it shows up.
Yeah. So, Chonte, can you share what makes this middle passage, this time in a woman's life, what makes it so unique? And what are some of the experiences that a woman may draw to her during this time?
Well, I guess, and I can speak from my own experience. One of the reasons why I feel it's so unique is just because Angelise Irene talked about moving into the middle years as being a time of her redreaming. And in your youth, she would say we're in the time of accomplishments and triumphance. But when we move into our middle years, and she would describe it from 37 to 67, we move into a time where we're redreaming, we're reevaluating what was and looking at everything. We're taking things off the shelf that we put on the shelf. We're kind of taking those things down and looking at them. And when we do that, we begin to uncover a lot of grief, in my experience, a lot of loss, things we've left behind that we now may be ready to pick up again or not. And that triggers a significant amount of grief or loss, in my experience. We're looking at our relationships. Everything is being redreamed. We're looking at all parts of our life. So our career, everything that's within our life, it's our time to look at it again. It's no longer about how far we can get or how far we can go or how high we can get on the ladder. It is about, what does this mean to me? How is this important or not important? How is this going to serve me in this next phase of my life? So that's what I feel is one of the ways it's unique and some of the challenges that show up. Because what we used to do in our youth, for a lot of women, myself included, it no longer works.
Yes.
It just doesn't. But we keep trying to use those same tools, and those tools aren't working like they used to. And so we start thinking something's wrong, and then we start kind of going to these other. We start seeking out these different. Maybe it's drugs, maybe it's other. I'll say non-natural ways, because we think that's where the answer is, and the answer really is in, as we say in Native American tradition, it's in the direction of the West. It's in the introspection. It's in the sitting and going within and beginning to understand yourself again.
Yeah, that's beautiful. One of my mentors, James Hollis, who is a Jungian analyst, he describes this time as where the things that used to work simply don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave this metaphor of someone being like in an intensive care unit and being hooked up to all these machines, and that the experience of the middle years can be similar to those machines being unplugged and pulled away. And that person no longer having the supports that they used to depend on, the things that kept them going. And now it's about finding a way to keep yourself alive on your own and going within.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. And I know that, the way that you support women is also very unique. And if you could share what the healing journey involves when you support women in this process.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about what you just said about the unplugging, and it reminds me of The Matrix, which is my one of my top 5 movies of all time.
Me too.
Is The Matrix,
I
because
love
it's
that movie.
so profound, right?
Yes.
It's just so profound, and that whole unplugging you just described is that whole process of disconnecting and unplugging from the Matrix. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about that and how I support women, it's kind of like what that is. How I support women, it's awakening. If I could just pick one word, it would be awakening. And if I could pick another word, it would be remembering. So really, all I'm doing is supporting women in their awakening and their remembering of who they really are. And that just takes on many different forms for me, because I'm very grounded in folk medicine and earth and nature. It's going to involve all things natural. So I'm going to use nature. I'm going to use herbs. I'm going to use food. I'm going to use the wind. I'm going to use, messages from the birds. Like that's my signature. I'm all about, being this little flower, literally a little flower in the garden. So I'm going to bring that in, and we're going to use those metaphors, those themes in discussion, in actually making things for people. It's going to involve also, working with their strands of energy. I'm a big believer in our energetic anatomy. And that doorway is through our mind. And so we're going to use, meditation. We're going to use trance work, all to awaken and to help the women remember.
Chonteau, what does it mean when you are described as being a modern day medicine woman?
So I think the best way I can describe it is, when I think of a medicine woman, I think of someone who is all about natural ways of living and natural ways of supporting and helping people. I think of that woman who, lives in that little cottage somewhere in some backwood area, and she has, all of her little potions and her little herbal remedies, and people go to her when they don't know where else to turn, because they know they're going to receive just open arms of love and community. And that's how I see myself. I see myself as this old woman that lives in this little cottage in the wood, even though I live in suburban America. But when you come into my space, it feels like that place of home and community. And I've always got some tea to give you, some syrup to give you, something to spray over your head. I'm always, out in the yard, in the garden. And I just feel like I've been transported into this modern world, but I have all this ancient wisdom. So a modern day medicine woman for me is just someone who pulls from her ancient wisdom and brings it forward to support humanity.
So can you give a couple of examples of what that might look like? Like, for example, maybe what someone might come to see you with, what their concern would be, and how you would support this person?
Yeah. So for most of the people that come to me they're struggling with usually something emotional or spiritual, or they're feeling very stuck in their life and they're not quite sure how to get things moving again. And so we'll start talking and they'll start unraveling their story. And as their story unravels, I begin to start seeing some of the remedies that might support them. So that might be herbal remedies. That might be some energy work such as Reiki or other types of energy medicine that you can do when you're working with someone energetically. And then I also use vibroacoustics, which is drums and different sounds to work with the person's energy energetically. So it's really varied how I work with people. It's different. It depends on what shows up.
Chonteau, what do you mean when you mention shamanic healing? What does that look like? What is that experience?
So shamanic healing is shamanism, as far as my interpretation, is just someone who walks between two worlds. someone who's walking in this reality, this 3 dimension, but then also is able to step through a portal and to be able to bring back this wisdom and knowledge and these healing methods from, let's say, another dimension, another dimension of reality. And so a shaman is just able to kind of move between those two worlds very easily. So shamanic healing is the same type of thing. It's being able to pull on these ancient healing methods that are not connected so much to our physical reality as we know it, but more connected to an energetic reality. So we often speak of, the fourth and fifth and sixth dimensions, kind of that sixth sense type of thing. And so that's what shamanic healing is. So anything could be considered shamanic healing through intention. I could sing a song for someone, the song that just kind of shows up from spirit. I could sing a song, and on one level, it's just a song. But on another level, it's getting into the creases and cracks of their energy field, and it's bringing about a deep healing.
And so the methods that, or the approaches that you are describing, they seem to come from the natural world is one source. Mm-hmm. And the other one is this other realm, a different space, another energetic field, and using those approaches to support someone in whatever healing that they are seeking.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes. Because everyone's in a different space. Everyone's showing up for a different reason. But the women that I work with, they're ready to be supported in their soul work, in that awakening and that remembering of who they are. And some women really, we just have a lot of conversation. But it's through those conversations that so much is awakened. And for me, that's shamanic work. It doesn't have to be something mysterious and mystical. A conversation itself can have so much benefit. Just hearing the stories and sharing the stories ignites things in people. It ignites their memories.
Yeah. Which makes sense because of that, as you described, that remembering and that awakening. So just telling the story allows that to happen.
Right.
Chonteau, what are some of the misperceptions that people may have about this type of healing?
Well, I think the misconceptions are that it's witchcraft or it's bogus, it doesn't work, it's hooey-dooey or it's woo-woo, and it could be considered all of that. For me, it is woo-woo, and in some cultures it is considered to be witch, like working with a witch doctor. But in some of those cultures, that's very valid person to go to when you're having dis-ease and discomforts in your body and in your mind and in your spirit. So those would be some of the misconceptions that people have. I just feel it's a lack of understanding, fear that shows up, that which is why it's misconstrued as something that is not valid. And we don't need a lot of, it's not a technical training that goes with it. Some people are just born with this ability to be able to tap into this other field, like you say.
And what could a woman expect to experience if she was going to work with you, if she was going to begin this process? And I know it's very unique and individual, but how would that process maybe unfold in some general steps?
Yeah, I guess in some general steps, the first step is just to connect and to see if it's a right fit. And just through that initial conversation, myself and the potential client would know, like, yes, this is definitely something that I'm needing and wanting, because there's a feeling of home. And so that would be kind of the first thing, is just to get a feeling of home. And then we begin to unravel the story. And as we unravel the story, then the other things begin to show up as to what is needed. So sometimes that shows up again as the herbal medicine. Sometimes it shows up as just this intuitive coaching that we just have these conversations and we do homework or we do little activities. Those types of things show up. Or sometimes it's books that would be helpful to kind of help stretch. Or sometimes we talk about our chakras, and I'll do energy work and energy clearing within the chakras, and we'll talk about how the chakras are moving in our lives. We do a lot of archetypical work or parts work where we're exploring these different parts of ourselves, our shadow aspects of ourselves, and things like that. So, yes, very individualized, but also it's very there's a movement, there's a dance to it, and once we get into that rhythm, the awakening begins. It's work. It's not like I do all the work for the person. This person is committing to do their own soul work, to take their own journey. That's going to include learning how to meditate if they don't know how to meditate already, and begin that practice of meditation, to open to their spirituality and to begin to develop that spiritual practice. This is their individual work that's happening kind of behind the scenes of each session.
And Chonteau, you published a book, which is an 84-day self-care journey for women in their middle years. Mm-hmm. Can you share how you came to create this resource for women and what it offers to women?
Yeah, I was in my last few years of working as a social worker, and I decided, I said, I'm working with a few women here in my private practice part-time, and I heard a lot that they wanted a tool, and they wanted a tool for self-discovery. They wanted a tool to help them get started in this redreaming process that I talked about. And so journaling is my way of understanding myself. It's something I've done since a child. And so the only thing I could think of was to create a journal. But I often hear that journaling is difficult and journaling is hard and people don't know what to write about. And so the affirmational journal has one question or one statement on each page that guides you in a process of change. So the whole journal is about three things. It's about revitalizing, it's about redreaming, and it's about rejuvenating. And each section of those things gives you one thing to do every day that moves you toward change and redreaming and revitalizing and rejuvenating your life. And so that's what women can expect. They can expect to be taken on a journey that will support them in this process of those three areas of their life. And I really like it. It's simple, but it's very profound.
Chonteau, what are the gifts of this time of the middle years? If a woman is able to open herself to this experience and to do the work, what are the gifts that are there for her if she chooses to?
I think the gifts would be, my initial feeling is that for me, the gift is to be able to enter into eldership as a respected elder. And I know that may seem really, really strange, but to be an elder is an honor in my community. And so I want to be the type of elder that is a mentor to others as they're walking this path. So the gift for me would be to be an elder that is able to share her stories of her pain and her triumphs and her redreaming for the support of other women. For me, that's huge. And to be free, that would be the other gift that I see, is just this freedom that you feel when you are tapped into your most authentic self. It's freeing. Those would be the two gifts.
Pretty significant gifts, I would say.
Yeah.
Right. So really coming to a place where because you've made this transition into being an elder, where you're able to give this gift to others and to help them to also make this transition. And then, like you said, the freedom, the unshackling, the possibilities that are created from connecting with who you truly are and having the courage to live that out in the world.
Yeah, definitely. This is not easy work, in my opinion. This is a commitment to self every single day. For me, that is what self-care is all about. It is about the commitment every single day that you're making to face yourself, to face your thoughts, to face your feelings, to face those shadow aspects of yourself, to celebrate your victories. Yeah, it's not easy.
No, it's
not. But it is rewarding.
It is.
It is rewarding, but it is not easy.
No, to face yourself continually and to confront and to get into relationship with aspects of yourself that you have forgotten about or would rather not know about.
Yes.
It's a process and definitely not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not.
Chonteau, you've spoken about shamanic healing, intuitive herbalism, and just your non-traditional approaches to supporting women in healing. I don't know if this question is even a question that can be asked. Maybe you've answered it already, but who can benefit from these approaches? Is there a type of person? Is there a type of issue? Like, what type of person will most benefit from these non-traditional approaches?
I think the person who is open. I mostly work with women. I do have, men in my care, but for the most part, women are drawn to me and they have an open heart and they are ready to do their soul work. They are ready to explore those parts of themselves that they have maybe forgotten or they've put way back in their minds or way back in their souls. And they're ready to kind of bring those parts forward so that they can heal and be free.
How can someone begin to integrate working with herbs or shamanism into their healing?
I think the best way someone can begin working with herbs is to develop a relationship. And I always say that to start working with sacred plant medicine is to enter into a relationship with the plants. And so start one herb at a time. Pick one that is locally around you that you can get your hands on. Something as easy as going to the grocery store and looking at the herbs that they have in the produce section and connecting with one that just calls you. You would be surprised what cilantro has for you, or what mint has for you, or what rosemary has for you. And those are easily accessible. So the best way is just to pick one and to begin experimenting in your food, making an herbal tea, or just smelling it. So that will be the way to start working with herbal wisdom. And then as far as shamanic practices, it would just be to learn about what shamanism is before even bringing these types of methods and ideas into your space. Begin to learn about them. Again, developing relationship and trying to understand rather than do and then try to understand. Try to understand first and then begin to bring a few things in.
That's amazing because as someone who lives in a very big city, and there's not a lot of, growing of gardens here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I think, maybe a common question that some listeners might have, would be, well, what if I'm not around a garden? Or what if I don't have a green thumb, or I live in a high rise, but I love how you just made it really simple that you can do this. You can go to the grocery store and just begin to get into a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge. I'm all about demystifying our relationship with using herbs, but it's important that herbs have definitely let me know that they want to be in relationship. That is the wise woman way. That is the folk medicine way, is to understand what's locally around you.
That makes so much sense. It reminds me of another interview that we recently did, and it was on the shadow of technology. And Dr. Byers spoke about how unless you can't understand something unless you have a relationship with it, because you're not connected to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he
Absolutely.
spoke about the need, the longing, the yearning to connect back with the natural world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's where technology comes from.
Yeah.
It comes from nature.
Yeah.
So to disconnect ourselves from nature is you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah. So you've kind of alluded to some of these things, but would there be any definite do's or don'ts as you begin to explore the world of herbs and shamanic healing?
I guess when you tap into your intuition, then your do's and don'ts become clear because you're following your own inner guidance. So my do's and don'ts are not your do's and don'ts, but it's important to tap into your own intuitive knowing. We all have that wise healer inside of us, and she's ready to support us and guide us if we'll pause and listen. So that's what I would say would be the do's and don'ts would be listen to your intuition. And when you find yourself pushing yourself, then pause. Because rather than pushing ourselves, we want to find a rhythm that is supportive and that's slow and steady.
So really, it's about beginning to get still so that you can hear and you can connect within yourself to what messages are coming through.
Yes, absolutely. So, when you go in the grocery store and you feel called to that rosemary, then pick up that rosemary and smell it. And when you smell it and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I think I'm going to bring this home with me. Then you bring it home. Where someone else might go in the grocery store and rosemary is an awful scent. Oh my goodness, it's just terrible. Well, that's definitely a don't for that person.
Right.
And she might be totally drawn to parsley.
So if someone wanted to work with a practitioner, what are your suggestions for this process, for finding someone, for working with someone?
I would probably say, again, well, two things. I think one, it's always great to know someone who's worked with someone. That always seems to work really well. So when you start talking about this type of stuff with your girlfriend, you might be surprised that, oh, yeah, I've gone to see this person and she helped me with this. And she just happens to be a medicine woman or a shamanic healer or an energy worker. So checking in with your community, because sometimes we hide this type of information because, again, we talked about those misconceptions. Sometimes we hide this information and we don't really talk about it. But if we have the courage to talk about it with one of our girlfriends or someone in our community, we may find that they already have a resource. And then you can check that person out. So that would be one. The other would be, again, check in with your intuition. If you're scrolling through, a database of a natural healing community, check in with yourself and see where you're guided to call and reach out. I don't always look at credentials because for me, credentials don't mean much. I check in with my intuitive guidance. I check in with my inner knowing. And when I reach out and speak with that person before scheduling a session that you're going to pay for and that you're going to get any work done, they should have some type of access where you just talk, just get to know. And that's when you connect, kind of like when I mentioned before about connect with this person. I connect with my clients first. Let's see if this is a good fit. That's me tapping into my intuitive knowing, and that's the other person, the client, tapping into her or his inner knowing. And that is how I would suggest that you find people.
This whole process, it really, all of it, the different approaches, whether it's the shamanic healing, whether it's working with herbs, whether it's choosing a practitioner, it all goes back to listening to your intuition.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And that it's not what others have experienced or what others have found meaningful. It's really going to be your own unique experience.
Absolutely. We are unique beings, and what's best for me is best for me.
Yeah. It's interesting just to, what came up for me was how I feel that one of the struggles that many women have is looking at other people's journeys and what worked for them and then saying, oh, well, I'll do that because it worked well for them. And I think this also fits in with, when I mentioned the shadow of technology where, you can be online and you Google something and all this comes up and there are all these little tantalizing distractions that lead you off your path. Right. And so, that just kind of came up for me about how, what you're describing is really this process of check in with yourself,
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Check in with yourself.
Yes.
There's some clients I have, I'll say, because it's such a new concept.
Right.
I'll say, if you have to set your alarm on your phone every hour to just pause and take 3 centering breaths and just check in with yourself, do it.
Yeah.
That'll be, if you have an 8-hour job, that is 8 times in the day you have checked in with yourself.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And there are people who have gone years or their whole life without ever checking in with themselves.
Yes.
And yet,
yes.
yourself, the body, the emotions, the feeling, the intellect is speaking to you all the time, saying, hey,
all the time.
I have something to tell you.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the time. It's all the time. And we miss it. And, and it'll just keep showing up.
Yeah.
That's the wonderful thing about our life is that things just keep coming back around.
Yeah.
If we don't get it the first time, that's okay.
They'll keep teaching.
It'll keep showing up.
Yeah.
It's going to keep showing up. You don't have to worry. But I think it just comes to when we get into that middle time of our lives, when we are redreaming and it's a time of pausing, that there's so much that we have ignored and that we've put away that it's difficult. It's hard. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot to face.
Yeah.
When we take those steps. And so compassion and gentleness is so important.
So Chonteau, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your insights and your wisdom around this time in a woman's life and also around these different healing approaches that are out there if she feels called to explore them.
Thank you. Can I mention one last thing?
Of course.
Okay. I was looking at your website and I was looking at the flowers that you have on your website and I thought it was just amazing.
Really?
How they were chosen. Because you have a echinacea flower on your website. And echinacea is for deep wound healing.
Oh my goodness.
And it's, I know echinacea is most known for like her immune building, stimulating properties, but echinacea is actually used to heal and keep infection out of deep wounds.
Wow.
So I thought that was awesome, given that what your podcast is about. And then the other plant that I thought was just like, are you kidding me? You can't make this up. Is that you have a black-eyed Susan.
Do I?
Yes, the yellow flower, the yellow petaled flower with the black center in the middle.
Okay.
On your website. That's a black-eyed Susan. Black-eyed Susans are connected to the Black Madonna.
Wow.
The Black Madonna is connected to the shadow aspect of ourselves. As, the white Madonna, Mary, right? Madonna.
Right.
The white Madonna is associated with the more illuminating, the more affirming, parts of ourselves.
Wow.
But the Black Madonna is associated with our shadow aspects of our emotions, the new moon.
Wow.
And so I thought that to be totally aligned.
Oh my goodness.
With what your shows are about and what you're supporting women with. And so I just wanted to mention that. that was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Chonteau, for sharing that. That
You're
really
welcome.
means a lot to me. And that's just so synchronistic. You can't make that stuff up.
You can't. You cannot.
Okay, so take care. And thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Chonteau. I love how she shared that the middle years can be a rich time, a series of transitions which are also initiations and blessings. I also liked how Chonteau described awakening, remembering, and redreaming as aspects of the middle years. I also loved that Chonteau gave us a few tips to begin working with herbs and also the importance of intuition in this process. And finally, how Chonteau described being in relationship with nature as the wise woman way. For show notes to today's episode and to links to all the resources mentioned, please visit www.lourdesviado.com/women in depth. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share the podcast with a friend. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.